Hey everyone, welcome back to The Office Hours. I'm Adam Shiansky. One of the questions I hear a lot is how do I actually get things done in a system that wasn't designed for change? Maybe you're at a Fortune 500 company where everything moves slowly. Maybe you're trying to work with the government, which can be incredibly frustrating. Or maybe you're just in an organization where that's not how we do things here, is the go-to response to your ideas. And today we're going to talk about exactly that. So my guest is Chelsea Roberts. She grew up in government contracting, quite literally. So her parents started a company in her house when she was 8. She went on to sell that company, and now she helps smaller businesses navigate the world of federal government contracting. Here's the thing. Chelsea didn't just work in bureaucratic systems. She actually thrives in them. She knows how to move ideas forward in environments specifically designed to minimize risk and maintain the status quo. So we're going to dig into the real question. How do you build disruptive ideas into organizations that do not want disruption? Why does bureaucracy even exist in the first place? And most importantly, what can young professionals actually do about this? This is one of those conversations where Chelsea gets really specific about strategies that actually work. And so this is not just theory. I would even say it's kind of like free consulting. It's all going to come from someone who's been doing this for years. So if you're trying to innovate, stay true to your values, but also navigate a system that doesn't make it easy for you, this episode is for you.
Tell me a little bit about how you find your passion for something that, if you use the B word in business, like the bureaucracy, it makes most people roll their eyes and want to roll over in their grave or something like that. So how do you find your passion for something that can make other people feel so incredibly overwhelmed?
I grew up in government contracting. My parents worked for large primes and then decided to stop working for large primes, and they started their own company, and they were government contractors. And so they started this company in my house when I was 8, and it was okay, great. There goes my childhood. I was assigned to put office clothes on because jammies were no longer office attire, and I couldn't go upstairs in jammies anymore. And it was man, I really saw the change in my life when they started their company. So it was I was really brought up in this industry, and it just gave me such an immense and deep knowledge and a bit of an appreciation for all the things that the government touches and the government does. And it is on any given day working with the government, you're going to get something that you didn't expect. And I really shouldn't be surprised anymore, but there are still things that surprise me that happen, and still conversations that I have that still surprise me. And I'm it is an ever changing and ever interesting environment to work in, even though it is typically seen as just flat bureaucracy and some people might consider it soul crushing. But I did academic health research in my younger years, so I can say that is really soul crushing.
That really is.
It is. So, I really retain a strong sense of humor and the ability to just kind of see past the bureaucracy and see the fact that it's still people at the end of the day that need to get their job done. They need to do what they need to do. And they are all looking out for the best of Americans. They're looking to be better stewards of our taxpayer dollars. They're all looking to, especially within the Department of Defense or Department of War these days, they're all trying to make sure that our warfighters are supplied and supported throughout their journey through whatever battle space they may encounter.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think I heard you correctly. Did you say that this is a family business? Your parents started the business that you're running?
No, so they actually started a company. They had an ocean engineering business. So they laid all of the subsea cables for the Navy since 1999. There's this wave energy test site that's in Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii that they designed and installed. And they were responsible for every floating fence that's got diver interdiction netting that goes below it that you might find around a naval vessel that's in port or offshore. So they grew and ran a very successful government contracting business. And by the time that I had finished up my undergraduate degree in health and life sciences and gone through my soul-crushing experience of working in academic health research, I realized that I did not want to continue doing that. And I took a look around and realized, my parents are getting older. They're up in their late 70s. And I said, they probably want to retire at some point. So I approached them and I said, if you guys would like, I would be happy to either run or sell your company. So they chose sell. So I found a manufacturing company that had a synergistic manufacturing production footprint in West Virginia, and brokered the sale of their company for them so that they could effectively retire. And when after that was all said and done, that was a very big effort to get all of that wrapped up and to get all of that effectively concluded. It happened to be the June of 2020, so we were just in the thick of the COVID pandemic, and everybody's commercial business was just taking a dive. And I realized, now, if any time, is the best time for me to be able to put my understanding and knowledge of the federal government to use for other companies. So let me just go see if I can, set out on my own, start my own company, and see if providing a service to these smaller businesses would be of a benefit to them. And it turns out that a lot of them were not aware that the federal government buys what they do, whether it's providing large amounts of mozzarella cheese or providing number 2 pencils or sheep herding services or weapons of mass destruction. They all have a role in this federal government contracting ecosystem that if they don't know about it and if they don't know how to approach it, it can be more than daunting. So I found that there was really a niche in which I could provide a lot of value to these companies that were losing a lot of their commercial business by giving them a sort of alternative revenue source from working with the government.
That's really cool. So you're also, it sounds like by nature just a very detail oriented person, right? Going into, like you said, biology, life science, doing academic research, things like that. So it seems like government contracting is kind of a natural fit, obviously from your family background, but from your own personal skill set. That's a really compelling story. So let's talk about how you think about bringing disruptive ideas into organizations that are designed to minimize risk, because that seems to be government contracting. They like things even keel, they like things to be predictable, but innovation is going to be disruptive. Let's talk a little bit first about why bureaucracy exists in the first place. Obviously, it's for a reason, right? The governments are bureaucratic. Fortune 500 companies are often bureaucratic.
Yes, they are.
So why are companies bureaucratic?
Man, well, it's something about something to be said about having rules in place, and it's probably because it's at some point somebody did something that was a little bit, it got a little bit of side eye, or maybe got them in trouble, and they were like, okay, well, we need to make a rule that says that this is specifically wrong, and you specifically can't do that. And throughout the years of government and federal government sort of existing, their federal acquisition regulation, or their FAR, that came out in the 80s. So they've just been they're notorious for not taking away any rules, but they add rules on when rules need to be made. So they start to create rules, and they never take any rules away, and you just end up with a very thick rule book that ends up becoming an instrumental part of the bureaucracy, the way it's shaped, the way it's run, the way it's organized, and it builds up over time, and you just become more and more bureaucratic, and you get more and more regulation, and you get more and more compliance requirements, and it's all because at some point somewhere somebody did something that was this is not good. This is a bad thing for a country or for the company or for what we're trying to do. So let's make a rule that prohibits that from happening in the future. And I think it's not bad intentioned. I think companies just kind of develop that, and the government develops that over long periods of time, when they recognize that we need to implement some things to prohibit bad things from happening, which it's understandable. It's learning lessons.
Yeah, and it seems like the ultimate outcome, right, is reducing risk, because they need that predictability, and really what they're after is consistency and scale, being able to operate at that level, but then also accountability. It seems
Absolutely.
to be a really large part of it.
Yes.
Right? How do you hold all these different contractors accountable, and there's all the reports that have to go out, so there needs to be consistency in the way things are reported and all of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about innovation then, because innovation does not follow that kind of curve, right? Innovation is disruptive. Innovation is about speed, about experimentation. So, in your experience, do these two different worlds of innovation and innovative companies, do they have a hard time talking to government agencies and trying to find their way in there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to a lot of the things that you said, that innovation is the enemy of bureaucracy, right? It is the enemy of risk, because inherently innovation has risk associated with it. You're gonna experience failures, and it's about like what you do with those failures and how you leverage those failures to make the next big jump and the next big leap, that you are able to take those innovations and turn them into something that is effective and successful, and that can be leveraged. And companies that are innovative, oftentimes they struggle with the immense amount of bureaucracy that the government has, and their processes and their practices, and trying to find the right door to go through to introduce your innovation into the government market is never really an easy, it's never an easy decision, it's never an easy choice, and it's certainly not very transparent or clear as to where that path is, or where that path ends up. So the government has its own programs that it has set up that it intends to be fosterers of innovation. So there's something called the Small Business Innovative Research Program. It's the SBIR or SIBR program, and companies are often shepherded into that program and told, here, this is your path, this is your destiny, take this and run with it. And it doesn't have it oftentimes does not have a very logical endpoint. So it's bringing companies into the environment and then saying, okay, good luck. See you wherever you end up, and hopefully you make it somewhere. And there's never really anybody whose job it is to make sure that their company or their innovation gets into the hands of the people that really need it. So it can be daunting, and it can be frustrating, and it can be very opaque when you're trying to see through the weeds of the government bureaucracy to get your innovation in. Absolutely.
So speaking of that program specifically, like what are the incentives to the government for that? Are they essentially investing? Are they providing like research dollars? For a company that is maybe a small business or small-ish business that wants to get into that kind of funding, what are the incentives for them?
Yeah, so it's there's two different sets of incentives there. The government is incentivized because, yeah, at some point the government recognizes, like, okay, we don't have access to everything that we need. They probably go home and in their kitchen they see something that they're like, man, I really wish we could just get this like really great kitchen tool into my day to day, because that would make my day as like a cook really easy, and it like would really improve my processes and my outlook. And they have a hard time because the government isn't inherently designed to just procure innovation from the get-go. They have to have like a bunch in place to say, we believe that this has worked, it's proven, it's tested, it's tried, we can trust it, that's not going to create a massive risk, like you're not going to create like a major grease fire or something. And then on the industry side, so the incentive on the government side is like their recognition that we are not inherently innovative. We have to have some sort of incentive to like, but we recognize that there are innovative solutions that are really good solutions that we need to be able to procure. So they are incentivized to leverage this SBIR program, because they realize that there has to be some way, shape, or form to get some sort of innovation into the government. And on the company side, this program, or the SBIR, and what's its sister program, the Small Business Technology Transfer program, is the STTR program. That's also a part of that sort of same aspect that works with academic institutions and organizations. But SBIR is they invest money into companies. It's a contractual relationship with the government to provide the government with something It's a phased program. So the first phase is typically like just a report. It's a paperwork exercise that you're documenting your proof of concept and just saying, this is something that we've researched that we believe will work. And then the second phase is typically getting into that MVP or that prototype phase, in which the government can see, okay, this is like, we got past the paperwork. You said it would work in the paperwork. Now you're getting into like the actual producing of the thing. And it doesn't have to be at scale or anything, but it's just something that says, okay, this, now it actually looks like it works. It's something tangible that we can see that's going to come into an outcome. And then beyond that, they get into what's like referred to as a phase 3, which is separate funding, but it's still sort of technically considered to be a part of that program. But the government sets aside this very minimal amount of their R&D budget. Most agencies, not all agencies, but most agencies have a SBIR program in which they set aside, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but something around 6% of their R&D budget that they say, okay, this is going to go to those SBIR type solutions. Now, that doesn't take any equity. It's not a venture investment. It's not any of the government taking anything away from these companies. So it's a non-dilutive funding aspect. So
Wow.
that's really where the incentive for companies is that you don't have to go out and seek outside capital. You don't have to go seek venture. You don't have to give up equity in your company. You can just produce these things in these sort of phased programs that the government will then pay you to do, just organically pay you to do. And they don't take any like stake or anything in your company, and it's non-dilutive. So that's really the investment or the incentive.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Are you your company? I probably should have asked you this at the top, right? But your company, do you help other companies navigate all of these different processes? Like, what's your role in all of this?
Yeah, so I like, just because I inherently know the government like better than I know a lot of my family members at this point. I tend to be a liaison, and we refer to our services as business development services, so fractional business development services. And what we typically do is we align a company with what ultimately their market is and should be within the government. We align them with the agencies that they should be engaging with. We identify funding from those agencies that those agencies have to procure solutions that these companies are providing. We oftentimes are helping the company understand and negotiate the best and most appropriate contractual mechanism to engage with the government in. And we're always advocating for mutually beneficial outcomes so that the government is in the best position to procure, and the company is in the best position to provide solutions to the government, typically over a longer period of time for a higher dollar value than what you would find for like just going at it alone. So we do a lot of matching between like procurement mechanisms and contractual mechanisms and companies that have solutions that the government needs in their hands.
Yeah. That's really great. It sounds like too, what a big part of that is helping to build trust, right? Bridging that trust between the government agency and the company. Because if the company especially if they're small, fast moving, very innovative, they might be used to like failing fast and things like that. They don't have the cadence that the government operates at. So it sounds like you do a really good job of bridging that gap and building trust between the two organizations, right? Why can you talk a little bit about why trust, building trust is so important before you start selling the technology?
Yeah. I mean, trust reduces risk, right? The more you trust somebody, the lower risk they appear, and the lower stakes that relationship will seem to have, even if there is still some risk inherent to it. The more you trust somebody and the more you trust a company to provide the outcomes that they say they're going to provide, the more likely the government is, and the government is to recognize that you are a lower risk and lower risk entity to work with, and the more likely that they are to buy from you. So it definitely comes down to the higher trust there is, the lower risk there is in the government's eyes.
Yeah, and having someone like Chelsea in your corner, right? You come with that trust between those organizations, or at least know how to work the channels. So there's a lot of credibility that comes with that, right?
Right. Yeah.
What would you say in this whole process where an innovative company is trying to get noticed or trying to get into this? What is the first thing that innovative companies get wrong when they're trying to get into the government contracting world?
They spread themselves very thin. So the government is not just one customer. It's composed of thousands of customers and individuals and people at the end of the day. So if you're saying, well, I'm going to approach the entire Defense Department or the entire Department of War with this solution, you're going to get spread really thin very quickly, and the number of acronyms that you'll have to try to figure out and the number of different languages that you'll have to speak between different agencies will very quickly become overwhelming and will reduce the amount of capacity and the amount of resources that you have to ultimately provide those solutions. So I always like to say, we focus on rifle shots. Don't shotgun shoot at everything that you can find, and not every shiny object is the right one to chase. Make sure that you understand your market, you understand the folks that you really should be talking to based on where their money is and what their requirements are, and what their timelines look like, so that you can get into the best position at the right time to be procured from.
Yeah, so being a lot more focused, like you're saying, and I bet that's pretty hard, right, for especially innovative companies who have a great product, and again, they're fast moving, and wanting to go, and get it out there as fast as possible. So what would you say, like, the most successful companies do to position themselves differently?
Yeah, the most successful companies are very they are very focused. They are very aware of who their customers are, what their needs are, and what their solution, whether it's a product or a service, what that ties in directly to their customer's mission set. So they have aligned directly with their mission, their requirements, their timelines, their funding, and they've brought all of those pieces, which oftentimes will be separate people in any given acquisition organization. They've brought all of those pieces to the table, and then they focus on making sure that they are addressing them appropriately, rather than just going out and saying, hey, this does everything for everybody really, really well, because I think we all know that that's just, that's not quite the way it works. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say I'm working with Chelsea now, and we're going through the contracting phase. Let's talk a little bit about negotiating,
Yes.
because you have somebody in your corner, or even if you don't, if you're going at this completely alone, when would you say that negotiating actually begins?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot earlier than people think, and it's typically in the solutioning phase. So when you're talking about like what their requirements are, and when you're talking about like what their kind of like funding looks like, and it starts really at that point. That's when you start dropping hints and putting in like bugs in people's ears and saying, it would really look great if this was a 5-year procurement period that we had, or period of performance. And it would make sense for everybody if we didn't have to come back to the negotiating table after we spent $500,000, if we just put what's referred to as a ceiling on this, and said, over 5 years, let's say we'll do 10 million. That way it gives the government the ability to say, okay, well, we don't need to have 10 million right now, but if we get that and if we want to spend that on this company, then we have the ability to. And it's really hard, because the government is a very hard negotiator, and oftentimes companies they get into this and they're just like, okay, well, I just have to take what I get. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. And with the government, it's not always like that. Sometimes they are very hard and firm, but oftentimes it is a negotiation, and it is making sure that you're sticking up for the best interest of your company and the best interest of your customer, and being able to make sure that you've got adequate time and resources to be able to deliver what you've promised, right? So it definitely comes down to having somebody who's comfortable negotiating with what is typically perceived as an authority, rather than a customer, and making sure that you push back where there's areas that don't seem right, or they don't seem like they should necessarily be implemented or imposed upon your contract or your company, because it always comes down to, there's always room for negotiation. So always making sure that you are comfortable going to the table and sticking up for what is right, and what you need to get the job done. Yeah.
That's the two interesting things that you touched on here. One, the question it came to my mind is like, well, if the government is kind of a hard negotiator, what are they really negotiating? And then two, it does seem like maybe a common misconception is you see the government as an authority and less as a customer, which maybe means you tend to give a little more than you typically would in a negotiation. So maybe we break those two questions up. But can you talk a little bit about like what is when the government comes to the negotiating table, what are they actually negotiating?
Sure, sure. And at the end of the day, it comes down to being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. I mean, there's any number of things like aspects of a contract that they can negotiate on, that you can negotiate on, period of performance, payment milestones, delivery milestones, intellectual property ownership. All of these things go into any sort of contractual relationship. But at the end of the day, the government will look back and say, were we a good steward of taxpayer dollars? Did we pay too much for this? Did we they probably will too infrequently come back and say, did we pay too little for it? But they will oftentimes say, are we getting the best value, and are we paying the right amount for what we're doing? Because all of the money that they are paying those are all taxpayer dollars that are coming from one pool or another. So they want to be good stewards of those taxpayer dollars and make sure that they're not wasting them or squandering them on things that are unnecessary. And so they oftentimes will dicker down on price just as much as the cheapest person in your family.
Yeah. So they being responsible with taxpayer dollars, certainly a responsibility of theirs.
Yes.
Is there anything else, like when they come to the negotiating table, that the government comes like with certain expectations of performance or expectations of delivery? And I'm asking because a lot of times what I see is there tends to be a little bit more cost overrun, and usually on the side of the company providing the service or the product. Timelines tend to be, they demand it at this, but then decisions can become slow, and you can go all the way back to the beginning of this episode and talk about bureaucracy decision making. How do you, on sitting on this side, if I'm the innovative company coming with my product or service, how do I take those into account, knowing that those are a reality, but maybe the other side of the table only sees it in black and white?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that I wish more people asked of me and of themselves is, the government will always want what they need yesterday. They will always want it for a lower price, and they will always want it to be the highest quality that you can ever imagine getting. So those three factors that come down to any sort of economic decision, right? It's like speed, quality, and price. So if you as a company, you need to take those into consideration, understanding that the government is going to try to get the best of all three worlds, and understanding that there's never a perfect world. That those are the three levers that you've got to work with, and that you need to understand yourselves better than anybody else, because the government won't understand you as well as you know yourself. So if you can deliver something that's just tremendously high quality at a remarkable speed, you need to make sure that you're charging as appropriate for that, because that's not going to be the lowest price, technically acceptable deal. That's not going to be the lowest price response. And if you bid yourself too low, then you will find those cost overruns. You will find a situation in which you are like, well, we kind of dug ourselves a little bit of a hole here, but we're still able to provide. We just need a little bit more money. So you need to just be aware of, like, first of all, what your costs are and what you want your margin to be. And then on the flip side of that, if it's a matter of delays, which if you need anything from the government, if you need input, if you need responses, if you need materials or resources or anything at all from the government to be able to produce or provide what you're saying that you will provide to the government is not a fast acting entity. They again, like, goes back to the bureaucracy. They've got multiple layers of different approvals and different people that they need to go through to make any one decision. So if you are counting on the government to be a partner and to be a part of what you're providing, make sure that you take that into account when you're doing timing. and you can probably move really fast, but the government, they don't move very fast. So if you need anything from them, you need to say, okay, well, we can provide it in 3 months, but the government's going to take another 9 months to be able to get us anything that we need in terms of like feedback or responsiveness to be able to actually implement and improve and redesign or change or
Yeah.
provide. So taking that into account and saying, like, yes, we could do it in 3 months. But don't tell the government that. Tell them we'll take
Yeah.
12 months. We will take
Manage
12
the
months
time,
into account.
manage the cash flow
Yes. Yes.
smartly. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what would you say is like one of the biggest mistakes that companies make when they are negotiating with these agencies?
Just feeling like they are an authority and that they won't budge. Most companies, they come into it and they figure, okay, well, we got a contract, so we just sign it and we're taking what we get. Like we're grateful for that. Which, I mean, absolutely be grateful for that, but recognize that there are clauses in there are terms and conditions in there, like as with any good contract, that you need to make sure that you review, that you understand, that you read through, that you can really be able to at the end of the day say, yeah, yes, we can comply with this. We can, or we need to have, like, we need to have more time, or we need to have more money, or we need to have like this doesn't apply to us, so why is it included in the contract, and things like that. So making sure that you're not just like taking things at face value, and that you're really reading through and understanding what the government's going to expect of you, and then come to the negotiating table and be willing to have conversations and be willing to discuss and bring your points forward, because the government is very aware that they oftentimes, like, they just copy and paste things from contract to contract, for instance, and there's things in there that might not even be applicable to you or your business. So if there's things that you find that are like that are in a, like, if either in a request for quote or even in a contractual document, before you just sign at the dotted line and say, yes, we accept, thank you so much, make sure that you're aware of the things that are in there, and that you can point to things and say, yes, this is like this, we can comply with that, that's applicable, that's good with us. And areas in which there are things that you're not good with, that you do want to bring to the table and say, let's strike this, it doesn't need to be included, it's irrelevant, or this is not something that we can comply with. The government's not going to, in most cases, there's an if, and, or but for everything, but in most cases the government is not just going to say, okay, well, thanks, but no thanks. We're taking that contract back just because you decided to come to the table and have that negotiation. So I think
Yeah.
that's first and foremost.
That's really good advice. Very smart. So let's say you've made it past that process, you've got through the negotiations, you won the contract, things are going well.
Great.
How do you stay innovative inside of this large system?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a hard question. Not a lot of companies give that much thought. And it's very hard for them to understand how the impact of working with a large bureaucratic organization like the government can really have an impact on your innovation and your innovativeness and your ability to continue to innovate. And oftentimes it comes down to drawing lines and boundaries. So in, like, terms of what you're providing for the government, you will have some boundaries, some gates, some regulations, some bureaucracy that is inherently implied in whatever contract you won. But that doesn't have to drain into and trickle down to the rest of your business. That you can still have this innovation group or this innovative organization as a part of your business. They don't have to be subject to all of the rules that the government is imposing just with this one contract or this one award. So making sure that you've got those lines within your own company that say, just because we're doing this over here doesn't mean that we need to hard stop,
Yeah,
fast, like
preserve the
everything.
culture, right? If
Exactly.
you're an
Yes.
innovative culture, preserve that
Correct.
culture.
Yes. 100%. Preserve that innovative culture.
Yeah, that's really good. What about you think through like the structure, right? Knowing when structure helps you versus knowing when it hurts you. And I think your own example is what keeps coming to mind. You went from you kind of found yourself in a place where you're just naturally creative and innovative, even though you're detail oriented and you love the research and the detail side of things. You kind of reinvented, and so you live in both worlds. You live with a lot of maybe small and medium-sized businesses and companies that do aspire to continue to be innovative, and you've got your foot in the other camp where you're connecting them to the bureaucracy of the government, right? So can you talk a little bit about that journey for even in your own business and in your own life, like how you kind of keep a foot in both camps?
It is not easy. It is by far one of the hardest things that I've had to do, and it comes down to having points in which you check yourself and you look and to see, okay, am I becoming too rigid? Have I gotten too comfortable with the rules or the way things are and the way things are going? Or am I still leaning into some of these things that have a little bit more risk, or that have a little bit more of that opportunity to create some change or some difference? And if I find myself like doing the same thing over and over and over again, then that becomes a process, right? But if I find things that it's new, it's interesting, like all the time, those are things where I'm like, okay, we can look at this and we can take this as an example of how to manage that internally, and how to take that in, how to understand that, and how to constantly be willing to learn, adapt, and grow to things that are coming in, that are changing. And it is definitely one of those things where you can just get very comfortable with the way that things go, the way that bureaucracy is like allowing you to go, and just that status quo. But if you get too comfortable, you're never getting out of your comfort zone, where change and difference happens, and that's where the most progress is made, is outside that comfort zone. So I do try to check with myself every now and then, and just be aware of if I'm getting too much in that comfort zone.
I like that a lot. And so this whole, little thing that I like to do, this podcast, is all really geared towards business students and, young professionals who are trying to kind of find their way. So I think what you said will really resonate with people. It's reinventing yourself. Don't be afraid to be innovative in your
Yeah,
own life.
absolutely.
Do you have any other advice for somebody who's just getting started, somebody who's trying to work their way through an organization right now, or work their way into a job? What advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid to speak up and to bring your thoughts and ideas to the conversation. Oftentimes, especially folks that are new and just entering the industry, they feel like they just need to kind of sit and listen and be a fly on the wall. But that's oftentimes where some of the best ideas come from, is from that outside perspective, somebody who hasn't been jaded by the industry yet. So, like I'm always saying, if you've got great ideas, if you, even if you don't think they're great ideas, if you've just got something that somebody hasn't said that's just a little bit different, speak up, say something about it, and you will oftentimes be appreciated for doing so. And your thoughts and ideas, they matter, and so bring those to the table, and don't be afraid to say some of those things when you're working in a
Yeah.
group.
Yeah, that's really good. It's one of the things I like to encourage, even just in my own students and in my children as well, is don't live in the middle, right? You pick a side. Be disruptive, and pick one side or the other. But if you live in the middle, it's a pretty kind of quiet existence, I guess. But
Yeah, it's a tough world to
um,
live in.
yeah, it is. What's one thing innovative companies should stop doing when they're trying to work with large organizations?
Oh, that's a really good question. Stop playing by rules that you assume are there. Stop assuming that things won't go your way, or assuming that you have to do it one way, and just do it the way that you know you'll be successful, and you will inevitably get somebody's attention, and you'll be successful.
What's one thing large organizations should learn from innovative?
That bureaucracy is not always the right way, and it's certainly not always the most flexible way to get things done. Small businesses that are agile and adaptive and can pivot, they have something that large businesses don't, and that's the lack of distinct and overwhelming bureaucracy that the large businesses have developed over the years. And it's no fault of their own. They should recognize that these are invaluable assets to have on the team, because they can bring things that other large businesses just can't, and that's the ability to be flexible.
Yeah, that's really good. If we were to answer the theme of the conversation here, how do you bring disruptive ideas into organizations that are designed to minimize risk?
strategically and by lowering the perceived risk of those innovative solutions. So by giving the level of increasing the amount of trust and the level of confidence in those solutions as they exist, and recognizing that everything's got a little bit of risk associated with it. Even bureaucratic rules have some risk associated with them. So just recognizing that that's something that they're always looking at and looking out for, and being aware of that and being comfortable navigating those channels.
Oh, that's really solid. Thanks. Anything else that you want to share?
Well, I think that there's plenty to share, but I will say, follow me on LinkedIn. Please reach out if you have any questions, even if you're just getting started or if you're just entering the industry. I love to talk to folks that are in this world of emerging and innovative tech. So if there's anything that you ever want to know or want to pick my brain, I'm always happy to have those conversations. And tune into my podcast, which is called GovCon Unscripted, for those stories from throughout the government contracting ecosystem.
Oh, awesome. Chelsea, thank you very much. This was a great conversation, and I learned a lot. And I know that, it's such good advice, because a lot of times, exactly like you said, we come with assumptions about working with the government. And it sounds like a lot of times those assumptions are incorrect. And having somebody like you in our corner can really be a game changer when it comes to building trust, when it comes to wanting to stay disruptive. I want to maintain my culture in my business, but at the same time, there's a lot of really good work being done on the government contracting side.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity, and likewise, it was a great conversation.